Hello and welcome to another edition of History After Hours podcast. This is season 3, episode 2. With me as always is Mr.
Ron Franklin.
And today we have a special guest.
Keith Todd.
Keith Todd is with us. He's kind of newish to the Lakeside community. And so before we get going, why don't you give us just a little sketch of your background, kind of how you made it to this point?
All right, so came out of high school, kind of went community college, didn't really know what I wanted to do yet. Thought I wanted to be a meteorologist.
Oh.
So kind of finishing up the associate's degree, time for that next step, start researching programs, seeing classes like cloud physics, decide, you know what, maybe meteorology isn't for me. But I really liked helping other people. You know, I'd been a tutor and I enjoyed helping people in the classroom, so teaching seemed like a natural fit. So I went for that, finished up at Missouri Southern State University, got my bachelor's, right when the bottom dropped out, you know, the housing crisis there in 2008, then just kind of everything dropped out. That's when I graduated. So teacher that was about to retire, they weren't retiring anymore.
Yeah.
So I started working on my master's degree, almost done with that. My wife got a job down here at the national park. She's the natural resource manager, and that brought us down to Hot Springs, and was lucky enough to get on at Lakeside.
Yeah. So it kind of makes sense. You teach geography here is one of your things, and so the meteorological sort of love of maps and whatnot, that fits in with that really well.
Yeah, fits in
cool.
exactly. Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Well, we're going to kind of go around and talk about different issues, current topics. This is September 6, 2017. I'm sure by our next podcast, everything will be different. But the first topic, we talked about this in the last podcast. Let's touch on it again. What has changed since last Wednesday? Let's talk about North Korea. So where do you think we stand, fellas?
Well, first of all, you got to bring up the idea that they've tested another nuclear device.
This time hydrogen.
Is that surely known, or I mean, it was a much larger explosion.
They think.
Right. So yeah, I mean, all indications based off of the Richter scale readings, we were getting 5.6 underground test. There's every reason to think that it is hydrogen.
I thought I heard one as far as like 6.7. I mean, I heard
That could be.
Yeah, and then aftershocks, and then apparently there was some sort of collapse in underground, and that caused even more ruckus. So yeah, to think that, I mean, nuclear is one thing, hydrogen is another step up from that even. Both dangerous, obviously, and alarming, especially in the hands of this particular.
Remember 1 year ago, people were talking about, they don't have the delivery system, it's going to be. They've made a pretty good push in the last year as far as having nuclear weapons, and then their ability and just to test them at will and kind of challenge. The question is, what's their end game? That obviously they want to sustain the regime they have. Do they want to become an accepted nuclear power like Pakistan, where we just kind of deal with it?
That's kind of where I go with this. Is it because a lot, especially students, they're like, "Oh my God, you know, the news is all this and that. It's going to be war," and even Nikki Haley this week, they're begging for war. That's our United Nations envoy. I don't know that I buy that. I mean, obviously the rhetoric is potentially dangerous on both sides, ours and theirs. But realistically, if I stop and look at this story from a process of decades developing into what it is today, I go to what you said a while ago. The Kim family's ultimate goal is to rule this country with an iron fist, and to cause nuclear war. It doesn't maintain that power. They cannot stay in power, and he's not an idiot. He's got to know that'll ruin him, right? And so I don't know that that's where they want to go. I think that more than anything else, that they're seeking some type of international legitimacy. We are a modern country with an arsenal that will match up with anybody else, and you need to take that seriously. I really don't think that they want to tip it to warfare. But
they can't. I mean, at the end of the day.
But I wonder though, how far do you push this with a denial of what they really truly want, which is stay in power and be internationally recognized as such, or at least give them some sort of nod, as an out, I suppose, so they can look good in front of their own people. I think that's what he wants more than anything else. So, but is there going to come up a time where, through our rhetoric and lack of diplomacy, where we actually push him into a corner where he's got nothing else to lose, and then all of a sudden he launches, and then we're all going just massive free for all? I don't know. Like, I really wonder.
I mean, this really does feel like saber rattling on the grandest of scales on both sides.
Yeah.
Because for him, the writing's on the wall. So it's not just the international thing that he's dealing with. They have a 40-year strong national narrative of North Korea being the biggest and baddest thing. Their propaganda machine puts them up as being the greatest thing in the whole world, especially the Kim family.
Mm-hmm.
You've got stories about Kim Jong-un's dad, the very first time he picked up a bowling ball, bowled a 5 frames at 300, and then retired from the sport forever and never picked up one again. Those are national stories that they tell in their museums, and so they're having to back that up some kind of way. And this ultimate kind of power that we've developed so far as human beings is the best way to do that.
This is the best way for them to pat themselves on the back, though, and applaud their efforts. And look what we've achieved in spite of all the sanctions that are against us, in spite of all the isolationism. Look at and he tells his own people that, look at what your sacrifices have been able to bring to our country, and the glory to stand up against a country like the United States, which we're their main antagonist, obviously. And for them to promote the idea that they've done this in spite of what we're doing. And every time, and I know that from our standpoint, we don't want to look weak to this particular country, but at the same time, every time you goad them, it just gives them more fuel for that narrative and gives him a more entrenched power, because now we're proving him right. Since 1953, they've been saying, the United States is about to invade us. Well, now, with all the maneuvers and everything we do, they've been provocative, but at the same time, we're sort of giving them more room to be more provocative every time we do something that seems retaliatory.
Yeah.
Well, the concern for me is not North Korea, it's China.
Absolutely.
China is the factor in all of this because of our activity in the South China Sea. And
I'll throw 2 more into the mix, though. I'll throw Russia and Iran.
Well, yeah, of course. And here's I heard a foreign policy expert say this. Somebody asked this person, I forgot who it is, but they said, do you see anything that hasn't really been talked about, something out of left field? And they said, well, if we really don't want North Korea to keep going, we make a deal with China to take, because most of North Korea's imports and exports go through China. Mm-hmm. China can completely control North Korea, and all we have to do is promise to leave that area, the South China Sea, and abandon some of our posts there. And if we could make China make that deal, they could take care of North Korea. We get out of there. But no one's talking about that.
But what's in it for
solution.
China right now is that they still have a trade partner with them. They have a nice buffer between themselves and the South Koreans.
That's the big thing, yeah.
And somebody to sort of, I don't know, in a sense, do their dirty work and face against us when they don't really have to. So they can sort of be.
Yeah, they're in a decent spot.
Position. Yeah. So and they don't want if this goes down, they don't want their refugees, even if they're on our side, and this all falls apart. Like that's I would think one of the last things that China wants to deal with. We're not you, and we they can manipulate them in different ways without having to actually be directly responsible for all those people.
Does the White House have an overall strategy, or are we just playing? It seems like
I don't know.
Let me rephrase that. There is probably a difference between Donald Trump's what he tweets and says versus what the White House position is with some of the generals.
Yeah, we've seen that demonstrated multiple different times.
Right.
Is there a scenario where we actually walk in there and try to do something about this? I don't see it unless he goes to the effort of. I mean, even with shooting a missile across Japan and landing out in the sea. That's mega provocative, but at the same time, I wonder if they're sort of goading us into doing something stupid so that they can justify what they do next. I wonder.
I definitely think that's part of their strategy. And they are, at the same time, if they're goading us, they're goading China. They're fully aware of China's role in all of this, too. And I think that foreign policy expert, obviously they know what they're talking about. But from the United States foreign policy perspective, chances are we're not going to be willing to cede that hegemony to China. We don't want to let go of the South China Sea. We don't want to let go of our allies in South Korea and in Vietnam.
Right.
We're not going to be willing to do those things because we've been the dominant world power. We're still trying to keep it that way. We're seeing more and more anxiety in the U.S.
We usually don't give up territory.
Right. We're seeing more and more anxiety about potentially losing that role. I think doing that is going to be considered by the Trump administration as a loss of face. I can't see them going that way.
Let me throw this dark cloud out there. It's just completely conspiracy-minded. It just came to mind. I wonder if it's in our best interest to continue to ramp up the rhetoric, because now we have the opportunity to sell more weapon systems to South Korea and Japan. Military contractors make a lot of money, bro.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
absolutely, and that drives policy a lot of times.
You wonder, because I mean, think about that. South Korea's already put in a new order for more missile technologies and things like that, and we're making money off this deal.
Eisenhower warned us.
Yeah.
That's very negative for me to say that, but at the same time, you gotta wonder if that's not part of the scenario in there somewhere.
Well, I mean,
Somebody's making money.
tragedy
And that's
makes
us.
money.
yeah.
That's
And
just a
it's
fact.
us.
Yeah, tragedy makes money. There are people making hand over fist right now in Houston. And taking advantage of that situation.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just-
and we got another big hurricane as we speak, headed towards, I guess, Florida. Do we know the
They're talking
latest
about nearly
trek?
definite, like just landfall by Saturday, right?
Mhm, yeah.
Mandatory evacuations for tourists right now in Key West. Mandatory evacuations by Friday
Mhm.
for the residents, I think.
Yeah, they're being told to get out, and they're making it happen.
Do you know how many people live in Miami-Dade County if they take a hit on that side? If it comes up, even if it glances them, you've got what 3 million people or so
Mhm.
just in that area. How are you gonna appropriately or effectively evacuate people that need to be evacuated? I don't know. Does this turn into some other mega thing? The worst hurricane we've had of this size that actually hit Florida was what, Andrew, back in '92.
Andrew's been the last major one,
But there's been a ton of construction since then, and people moving in and all that,
Mhm.
right? So I wonder, could this potentially? I don't want it to be worse, but could it?
in terms of property destruction, I think there's definitely the potential. In terms of loss of life and people, I don't really think so. I think Florida learned that lesson from Andrew.
Yeah.
Their evacuation plans and getting people out are pretty solid. That's
You ever
something that
driven
they
through
work
Miami,
on a
though?
lot. I mean, you're absolutely right. Just on a regular 5 o'clock, in the afternoon, you're having a bad day.
Yeah,
I
gridlock.
listened to a climate change guru, which I know that's going to be a politicized subject, but he was talking about just the rise in seawater. If the ocean levels just rise up a few inches, it makes all these hurricanes way worse because of the height of the storms. But also, if the ocean comes up just 2 feet, 80% of our population lives within 50 miles of ocean. Just if you think about Bangladesh or Vietnam, where they grow a lot of the stuff that feeds the people, that would be underwater. And they said it would be like 100 Syrias all over the world, refugees.
Wow.
So I was like, oh no, I just don't even want to think about what
Did
that
you
would
see,
be like.
after the Houston stuff, did you see, you know who Ann Coulter is?
Oh yes.
Okay. She made a comment, and I saw this on Twitter, and I saw people's reaction to it, so I want to get your take on this real quick. She said, and I'm going to try to directly quote this, she said that I don't believe that Hurricane Harvey is a punishment from God about destroying Houston because it's evil or whatever. So I have to paraphrase a little bit, but something like that. I don't believe that this is a punishment from God. However, that's more acceptable than climate change. That's a more reasonable explanation than climate change. What's your response to that?
Well, I mean, part of that is pandering. She has a base of people
true.
that.
Yeah, I know that.
I mean, she's a personality. She sees the writing on the wall. The more inflammatory they get about climate change, the more a lot of their audience likes it. There's a reason that Rush Limbaugh made that outrageous claim that he did that maybe Irma doesn't even exist. Maybe it's just a leftist conspiracy.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's feeding their audience.
There it is.
It's feeding their audience.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
I think that's most of what we're seeing here. They understand that they're entertainers, and that's what is getting the ad.
Who's that
revenue.
boy from InfoWars?
Oh,
What's his
yeah.
name?
Oh, I would have known it.
You know who I'm talking about, though.
Oh,
right?
Alex something?
Is it Jones? Jones.
Is it Alex Jones?
Sounds right.
Sounds
That's close.
But no, he does a lot of inflammatory type stuff too, and he's pushes the envelope on what can be considered good taste and whatnot. But I saw him on a different thing one time outside of that context, and he said, I'm an entertainer. This is a character that I'm playing. And so, but people forget that sometimes.
Yeah, he's not a news outlet,
not a
and he
news
just
guy.
comes up with a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And,
Anyway,
oh, yeah, I mean,
Most of what we consume as news is that way.
The rea-
It's not their news segments
sure.
that we're paying attention
Right.
to. We're
News
paying
entertainment,
attention to the
yeah.
commentator.
yeah, I wrote
Commentators.
like a just off last year. I remember we were having all these conversations about fake news and all this when Trump was running, and I wrote like a 4-page thesis about fake media and how it happened with the cable news because they have to get numbers.
Sure.
And, we don't have a Cronkite that gets paid $1 million to deliver the news. Money went away, and now it's just this. It's
Radio.
sensationalized
It's
and
just-
radio. It's yellow journalism,
and they're all
except on the internet.
guilty of it too. That's the thing,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, and that's what I do. I go home and I flip between some of the conservative, and it's hilarious. I mean, and also really scary.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on.
Right.
Let's talk about, let's say it right, DACA.
Mm-hmm.
Boom. Okay, so Trump came out, what was it, 2 days ago, or I guess 2 days ago.
Let's clarify what that is for people
Okay,
that don't
yeah.
know. Okay, so this was an Obama-era executive order that was meant to protect children of people who had come here as undocumented workers or whatever, just illegal immigrants, let's say. And so DACA, deferred action for childhood arrivals. So it was...
And they call them,
the dreamers.
you know, I'm a
this,
dreamer. Yeah.
All right, so, but that's been in place since, now when did he issue that? When was it?
I want to say it's around 2 years old. Does that sound right?
Is it?
I don't remember.
I can't remember exactly when they put that in place. All right, so it's been a couple of years though, for sure. And it was highly controversial at the time. People were like, "Oh my God, you're giving sanctuary to people who don't deserve to be here," and this and that. And so, all right, so let's do the pros and cons on what that was, and then we'll talk about what Trump did. How about that?
Okay.
Right. So, what would be the benefit for anybody for the president to step outside the bounds of Congress and to put an executive order in place that says we're going to protect the children of people who came here illegally? Like, why would he do that?
Well, so not just during Obama's administration, but even before that, we've had multiple Congresses that for over 15 years have just not done immigration reform. Everybody's afraid of it. That was actually one of George W. Bush's big pushes. He wanted immigration reform. Mm-hmm. Having been governor of Texas, he understood a lot of those issues and wanted it to happen.
Didn't Clinton and the Clinton-Gore administration, didn't they go at that as well a little bit? It seems like they mentioned it at least. Okay.
Yeah. That was kind of the beginnings of the big push towards the southern border immigration reform. And I mean, part of that was, you mentioned Clinton, NAFTA is involved in that, discussion at that point too. So if you've got Congress unwilling to act, a lot of times that forces the executive's hand, because you have a moral dilemma there, because you have people who have grown up in the country that were technically here illegally, but through no fault or choice of their own. So is that totally fair? So we've got that ethical dilemma. And
a lot of the people who've been against that have been, it's this, unconstitutional. Even, we were talking about Tom Cotton last week. He came up with a statement, Obama's unconstitutional. It's basically an usurpation of power. And so it's not unconstitutional for a president to issue an executive order. So at the same time, what's the purpose behind that executive order? I think that's much more the point than just, political posturing. The idea that Congress wasn't dealing with it, and this is an attempt to try to force their hand to come up with some real legislation that will then take care of this, so that the executive order doesn't have to do it. Like I wouldn't have to do this if you hadn't put this in place. So to try to be fair about that, it was within the bounds of his rights as an executive officer to do that, whether or not whether it needs to remain a singular issue with an executive order. Like, that wasn't ever the point, as far as I know, right?
Right. I mean, an executive order is meant to be a stopgap. It's not meant to carry the force of law, and that you do it and it's this way forever. Mm-hmm. It is supposed to be that immediate kind of action. All
right, so let's clarify what this thing does too, though. What you have to do is that people voluntarily came out of the shadows to admit that they were undocumented.
And to register that way.
And then to register with Homeland Security, go through a vetting process, and prove continuously that they are either in school or employed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and there's what, 800, the number that I keep hearing, 800,000.
That's what I've heard.
Who've come forward. Now, there's plenty of others who didn't, right? And they took a real risk in saying, yeah, here. All right, so, and a lot of them are young adults now from what we're reporting too. So this was, to protect, they may have come here when they were very young, but now they're older, but they're still, So what do we do? So now Trump comes along and he's like, okay, this is one of the things that he mentioned, that he was going to, immigration, this and that.
Well, then he shoved it to Congress. And
Southern Border Protection. Well, right, but then, at what point do you think it's concerning that he took this action right now? Just say we're going to end this, because it's not like a chopping block kind of thing, right?
No. So it's what Trump said was it's going to be a 6-month thing. Yeah. Well, what it's actually going to be is more of a 2-year-long process to unwind a lot of these provisions in DACA. But I mean, it was never meant to be a permanent solution anyway. I mean, it's in the name. It's deferred action. Yeah. This isn't permanent action on childhood arrivals. And so it was something that eventually Congress was meant to have to handle. I think this was a very astute kind of strategy by the Obama administration when they did that, because it's hard to walk back change. it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. And so
That's the same thing that he did with healthcare.
exactly.
I'm going to pass this with all the problems, knowing that it's going to be really difficult for them to undo this. And he thought he was doing the greater good, probably like he did with this as well.
Yeah. So now you've got all these people who they've got 2 years worth of arguments of look at what we're contributing to the country.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we be allowed to stay?
Well-
I've seen one person who was, I think, from Slovakia who is here under the DACA, who became a YouTube star, and last year paid $400,000 in taxes. That's a really powerful argument for look at what I'm
And what
contributing.
about
I
the
should
ones
get
that
to
joined
stay
the
here.
military too? We have people that have actually served to protect the country that they have called home since they were, young, and now this is potentially going to be something that takes them out. But I don't think it's fair to criticize Trump for taking this action, because now it does put that ball back in the court for the legislative process to take place. Like with what is the timing funky? Because think about all the other things they've got that they're trying to do, like right now. I don't know. I don't think that it's wrong for him to do it. I just think that the timing is weird. That's the real issue that I've got with it.
Well,
yes,
that's a
need
Trump.
legislation.
That is Donald Trump. He's going to do something crazy this week, and next week he's going to overshadow it and he's going to throw you something else.
Why
And
would
it's
you
a
put
weekly
that
thing.
on a Congress that's already burdened with trying to figure out what they're going to do with healthcare? Seriously, trying to figure out. They're mentioning about are we going to tackle the tax code? Are we we're still dealing with funding the government past a certain point, and are we going to raise the debt ceiling?
Oh, yeah.
We're still dealing with the Hurricane Harvey stuff. Now the potential Florida crap that could come from this new thing, and then you throw this on top of that.
Well,
It
you've
just
got
I don't know. Just that part doesn't make sense to me.
You've got Lindsey Graham, you've got other Republican leaders stepping up here in the last 24 hours going, we would love to hear, let Donald Trump help lead the way in this. We would like to know what he would like to do. Kind of calling him out, saying, look, you're throwing this on us, but what's because I think immigration, just like healthcare, is a very complicated detail. You cannot make general statements. You can't just make these sweeps. The case-by-case basis is also going to be bogged down in bureaucracy trying to figure out. So it's just so complicated. It's hard
But
to
you see
figure
people
out.
take, and I'm going to take sort of a right-leaning stance on this for a second, because I see people who are against anything that he's doing, and in particular take this as sort of a banner now. And they're like, oh, he said that he loves the Dreamers, but does he really care about them because he did this to them? In an interesting way, I think that this will eventually help them, because now if you are facing potential deportation of people who have been contributing to this country, that's going to cause all kinds of ruckus, and nobody really wants that. So, I mean, do you as a senator or a congressman or anybody else want to see that kind of turmoil over this particular issue? Like, you better figure out a way to deal with this. So I think in an interesting way, again, my only problem is the timing.
Yeah. And that's what this has been. It's been just one thing after it. Politics, it's way too exciting. It shouldn't be this exciting. We shouldn't be talking podcast after podcast about politics. I remember when Obama was president and George W., we talked about the Iraq War, we talked about all the stuff, but it wasn't like this.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the media doing it. I don't know if it's because Trump is president. I don't know what the root cause or if it's a combination. But yeah, it's just, I was worried about North Korea last week, and now I'm worried about Dreamers. Who knows?
Yeah.
What about North Korean Dreamers? Do we have any of those? Are they out there? If so, come out of the shadows, please.
Okay, so we're going to finish this up. We were talking about this, and we'll get your opinion, Mr. Todd, on this. We have Mount Rushmore.
Uh-huh.
We have George Washington.
You ever been to Mount Rushmore?
I have not.
It is.
Isn't it in North Dakota?
It is in South Dakota. And
Oh,
it
South
is
Dakota, that's right.
awesome. Yeah. Just up the street from that is a Crazy Horse monument that they're building.
I've heard about
That's
that.
incredible, too. So anyway, it's not
Is there
nearly-
anything else in South
It's not
Dakota?
nearly finished. Black Hills, Custer, State Parks, Buffalo, or Bison, excuse me. Yeah, it's cool. I like it. It's nice there.
Because that's kind of why they built it
the
as a tourist
Badlands,
attraction.
yeah. So, so anyway, all right. So it's cool. Everybody should go.
Are they going to finish that Crazy Horse monument? 'Cause
Eventually, it's all private contributions. There's no state or government, or federal contribution to it at all. It's just one family and people donate to it. So it's really slow.
They've been working on it for over 20 years. Like, I can remember being a kindergartner
Have you
and
seen
getting
it?
those weekly readers, and we were learning about them building the Crazy Horse Monument then.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It dwarfs
Right, yeah, that's
the
what I've heard.
European heads.
Some of the architecture involved in making that arm stick out the way they've got it, like the physics behind that's incredible that they've designed that to make
Yeah,
that stay.
hopefully they can finish it in my lifetime. I'd like to see it just to see it. right, so back to what you were saying. Sorry.
So, on Mount Rushmore, for those of you who don't know, we have two founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. You've got Abraham Lincoln, who got us through probably, well, it is our greatest national crisis, the Civil War, and he is, responsible to some degree for abolition. And then you have a 20th century figure, really, in Teddy Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. So here's your question, gentlemen. If you had to take one face away and add one face, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a president,
okay,
who would it be? Who would you take off, and who would you add?
Do you have somebody in mind? Just curious.
Yeah, I thought about this.
You don't have to say. I just at the end there's a wow. Who would you do? All right, so I know some people would just like jump to Reagan, probably end of the Cold War.
You know what? I think that I would trade Roosevelt's. You've got
trade Roosevelt's.
Trade Roosevelt's.
One for the other. FDR.
I would switch them straight across because I mean absolutely I love Teddy and I love everything that he brought to American politics. I mean, he was a great showman. What if
he was a hurricane?
Only to have Teddy alive now in the age of Trump. What a wonderful political slideshow that would be, them going at one another.
Yeah, we talk about Trump's energy and how he's crazy and just stirring everything up. Teddy Roosevelt was pretty similar in some ways.
Right. I mean, we do a lot of hero worship of him now, but he was very similar. But on the other hand, you've got FDR, who leads us through World War II, pulls us out of the Depression, in some ways abuses his power a lot too, don't get me wrong, I've recognized the ills too there, but I think you could make a pretty firm, strong argument that he really deserves to be commemorated in more ways than he currently is.
How does that work? Here, okay, mine is Eisenhower. Mm-hmm. For the fact that the country is coming out of the war scenario, we're having to transition from a wartime economy into something that's still going to be massively like we create middle class at the time. Mm-hmm. The GI Bill that comes through during that time frame, the end of discrimination inside the military, the interstate highway system. Just the idea that we could keep that economy rolling and build a strong working middle class that is the envy of the world. Like that's to a large extent, in dealing with social crises, as we come through and talk about now that we've ended discrimination, segregation in the military, and then we see that happening in society as well. And the civil rights movement gets its start during his administration, and him trying to push for different, avenues for people to sort of rise up.
Yeah,
we're
on the 60th anniverary of Central, and that's Eisenhower Chavez going back and forth.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I think that he's my choice, and I guess man.
I mean, what a difference.
I guess Roosevelt is the one I have to replace. I like him a lot, but I just can't see how you get rid of Lincoln or Jefferson or.
No, I like that choice though, because how different is the U.S. without Eisenhower and the interstate road system? Mm-hmm. Like our economy is totally different. Our connectedness as a country totally different. Yeah, that's a major change.
Setting the stage for rebuilding Europe, on top of keeping our country going, mm-hmm. plus rebuilding Japan and getting our things organized in the Pacific. I don't know. I'm a big fan of his.
I like both of those. I would probably lean towards FDR. That was my choice if I had to pick one. Wilson is another interesting guy.
See, he crossed my mind.
Wilson, because keeping us out of World War I was big for us at the time. And then people don't think about this or give him credit, but women's suffrage actually came to fruition under Wilson. And I like the fact that he was an academic. He was a calm, cold figure.
Our only president to hold a PhD.
That's right. So I go FDR. We got two for FDR, and of course Eisenhower as well. I have to go with. I really am tempted to take Thomas Jefferson off.
Are you really?
He would be close to Teddy Roosevelt. I have to take Teddy Roosevelt off too. That's my pick. But man, as a
what would cause
he was
Jefferson...
a hypocrite. He was a hypocrite and did very little as president and made some, he wanted strict construction of the Constitution, yet he doubled the size of the United States. He railed against Hamilton's economic policy for 8 years, even resigned as vice president. And then when he became president, that's how he funded the Louisiana Purchase and didn't. And plus the Embargo Act.
Yeah, okay.
He didn't want to make a real presidential decision. He just wanted to will not trade with anybody.
Without his leadership in the foundation of the country,
his philosophy. Yes, that's right. Yeah, if you take his presidency off, you got to put him up there. That's why I can't take him off. Is because of his work prior to, and his philosophy on government to some degree. Small government. A lot of liberty, democracy. yeah, you can't. And that
The
Declaration of
Yalman
Independence,
citizenry. Yeah.
the most influential document ever written in American history.
Out of fairness to Roosevelt, he's on there because muckraking, I suppose, antitrust, busting, or not antitrust busting, but busting the trust of Panama
Even though
Canal.
Wilson did more than that and Taft more
Yeah.
than he did.
He gets the ball rolling, though.
He got the ball rolling.
Panama Canal.
Yep. Although he started a
I know
revolution
that
to
we
get
had the previous to his presidency, the idea about Spanish American War and
Yeah.
leadership through that. So taking Panama, but also dealing with Cuba, getting them on our side, getting this, basically kicking Europe off this side of the world. Dealing with the Philippines,
Really getting our Navy on track. I mean,
The Great White Fleet.
Without his leadership in terms of Navy in particular and the military, we're in a much worse position to try
Don't
to
you
enter
think he's
World
the
War
first
I.
president to actually be able to back up the Monroe Doctrine?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's nearly 100 years difference.
That put
Well,
John
88
Quincy
years.
Adams on the map, on my wall 100, because of what Roosevelt added to it. Basically taking, now, here's my reasons for taking him off, is he started a Colombian Revolution to take Panama.
Sure.
Yeah.
He supported a 4-year bloody war in the Philippines because they weren't quite ready to be independent. There's, looking at it from 2017, obviously there's some things we don't agree with the way he did stuff, but, as he said, I didn't steal the Panama Canal, I built it. And he didn't apologize for it. Died in 1924, never said a word about
Here's
all
another little
that.
thing that most
No.
people don't know. They didn't, that whole San Juan Hill aspect, they didn't, it was actually next door on a different hill called, I think it was Breed's Hill, and they didn't ride up the hill, they walked.
Yes,
None of-
that's
none of
very
that was-
dramatized.
None of that's actually
yeah.
true.
Did we before Teddy though? Did we mention the national park system?
Oh, no.
I mean, that's a
definitely
major
failure.
argument
Yeah,
in his
yeah,
in
man.
his
What's the
favor.
guy's name? Muir?
John Muir.
Yeah.
John Muir really kind of goads him into that and constantly come out
Pro-
here and see this. we
Protecting
need to
major
protect
parts
this.
of our landscape and dedicating it to preservation and conservation. Yeah, no, I.
Yeah.
But he was also railing to go to war in World War I. In 1915, he was railing where Wilson was like, nope, 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 nope. And it's really good that we didn't.
Well,
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, looking back now, if Roosevelt had been president when World War I broke out, which, by the way, he tried to do,
Yeah,
he kind
closest
of.
anybody's ever come.
Yep, we got third party system. But I agree. Okay, so we're taking Teddy off.
Yeah.
And you're out voted 2-3. We're putting FDR on.
Okay, well, I can still live with that. I think it's a good choice, too.
All right, guys, that is this edition, this season. We want to thank Mr. Keith Todd for joining us, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.